Good evening and welcome. I'm Zita Strickland from Pacific Science Center. I'm very happy to have you all join us for tonight's Science in the City program. Tonight's Science in the City will be recorded for later viewing on our YouTube page, and there you can also find past Science in the City talks. For example, you can rewatch our recent Mars surface exploration in celebration of NASA's Perseverance rover safely landing on Mars last month, or you can brush up on the skills needed to spot misinformation and learn how to call BS, the art of skepticism in a data-driven world. All of these past Science in the City presentations are on the PacSci YouTube page. Now, tonight's program is sponsored and presented by First Tech Credit Union. First Tech is committed to supporting the next generation of leaders, thinkers, and innovators, and has been a longtime partner of Pacific Science Center. Joining us tonight is Ingrid Van Veen, Account Manager at First Tech.
Good evening, and thank you, Sarah. I feel honored to be here, and I'd like to take a moment to thank PacSci for our partnership. We are excited that we can help support Science in the City programs like this one, and many of the PacSci experience you missed the most, including the Hive, where startup in residence showcase their latest innovations, and What is Reality? Evolving experience that highlight emerged technologies. We are also very happy that we could partner with PacSci in the past year, providing support for the virtual field trips. One of the reasons that I joined First Tech is because we give back to the community and our members. As Sarah mentioned before, we direct our dollars and volunteer time to organizations that support education, research, and innovation. If you'd like to learn more of who we are and what we do and how we give back and build stronger and healthier communities, feel free to look at our website. You are also part of that stronger and healthier community. So if you'd like to learn more about how to build up your credit score or how much money you should have in an emergency fund to be financially stronger, check out the financial education on our website. If you have questions, feel free to reach out. Thank you for your attention, and I will give the floor back to Sarah.
Thank you so much, and thank you to First Tech for being an ongoing supporter of the Science Center, helping to make so many of our programs possible. You can learn more about some of the programs that we offer at pacsci.org, including Curiosity at Home, a library of activities that can be done at home or in the classroom, and information about our live and interactive field trip programs. Well, we've offered this event tonight free and invited you to make a donation, and many of you already have, and thank you. If you haven't and you're able to, we suggest a $20 donation for tonight's event. This helps us to ensure that Curiosity never closes. You can find out more information about donating to Pacific Science Center at pacsci.org/support. Now on to tonight's program. Tonight, we're going to start with a roundtable discussion, and we're going to end with a lot of time for questions from you. You see, we want to hear what you're curious about. So throughout the evening, you can put your questions directly in the chat right there on the YouTube page. Now, if you don't see the chat, it just takes a quick second to create a YouTube account, and that'll allow you to add chats and comments right there in that chat box. Now, this program tonight, Girls and Women in STEM, was inspired by March is Women's History Month. And March is a great time to reflect not just on the role of women in history, but also the women that are making an impact on the present and into the future. And so tonight's presentation and the roundtable is composed of 4 amazing women that are currently working in STEM, who have collectively a wide range of talents and experiences to share with you tonight. But no less as amazing is our moderator for tonight's discussion. I am pleased to welcome Angela Jones, Chief Executive Officer for Washington STEM. Now, Angela has a deep commitment to and a belief in the transformational change that education can have on creating social and economic mobility. And Angela brings over 25 years of passion, service, experience, and leadership in her time working with Washington's public education systems. Along with her passion and experience, Angela brings a really strong background in community engagement, fundraising, equity, and system cohesiveness. Angela, thank you so much for joining us tonight, and thank you for moderating this panel of amazing women in STEM.
Thank you, Zita. It's so great to be here. And I'm just so bummed we can't be here with all of our attendees in person. Wouldn't that be fabulous? So, Zita, I wouldn't mind sharing before I introduce our panelists. I'm going to share a little bit about myself and my why. And so I'm going to go ahead and share screen here. So that picture you see there is Angela Jones, 17 years old, senior in high school, who thought that she was going to be a microbiologist. And that version of Angela did not make it through microbiology. I started my STEM foundation very late in high school, got a bug for it through a minority apprenticeship summer program, and didn't see many women or many people of color in the program, and I quit. And so it's really important for me to do this work. I am a CEO of a STEM organization and I don't hold a STEM degree, but I'm passionate about serving kids like this version of Angela. And this version of Angela, obviously like the Breakfast Club, if any of you remember that group. So just to set some context, I wanted to share a national lens. And this is research out of UC San Diego on women in STEM. It's really important to know that we have a lot of work to do. And so thank you for PacSci for giving us this platform to share about this work. I won't go bullet for bullet, but I think it's really important for people to understand that our women in STEM fields, in some fields, is decreasing, and that's a challenge. We've all seen what happened in the pandemic with women leaving the workforce, and so this work and this platform continues to be really, really important. That last bullet about boys and girls, remembering that they're performing at the same level in K-12 math and entering, but they're not necessarily staying. So while we earn a lot of credentials, we're not necessarily staying in the field. The other slide I want to share is about our state, about the state of Washington. We are a high tech, high STEM field state. And we know that by 2030, about 70% of our jobs will require some type of credential. And when I say credential, I mean could be a 2-year degree, could be an apprenticeship, could be a 4-year degree, could be a certificate, something after high school. And we are finding that our students are not completing post-secondary credentials. We're about 46 out of 50 states in the country in post-secondary credential attainment. And then when we disaggregate with girls, students of color, low-income students, we'd have to triple the number of students in those categories getting credentials in order to hit that 70%. When we look at apprenticeships, we looked at a cohort in 2020 and 9%, only 9% of folks enrolled in apprenticeships were female. And so we want to make sure that girls are getting a chance and getting access to these opportunities. During the COVID-19 pandemic, we also know that the STEM sector was pretty well insulated from job loss. And so for so many reasons, it's important. And for so many reasons, the women I'm about to introduce to you are very important in their work as well. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our incredible panelists. And, we've got shortened bios, and you can actually go to pacificsciencecenter.org to read the full bios of these remarkable women. But I am going to read a nice chunk of them because I think it's really important for you to know what they're doing out there. And so the first panelist I'd like to introduce is Isabella Von Trapp. And Isabella's interest in hydrogeology was sparked by an intro-level geosciences class at Pacific Lutheran University. She earned her BS in geosciences in 2016 and followed it with an MS from the University of Montana. Her thesis work focused on using water chemistry to better understand the role groundwater plays in sustaining water resources in a changing climate. Some of you are Googling that right now. She has spent the last 3 years as a project geologist in Aspect Consulting's water resources practice. Isabella works on a wide range of water supply development projects with a particular interest in developing green energy alternatives, such as ground source heat pump systems. She recently supported 2 systems at the Washington State Public Health Lab in Shoreline and the new $60 million carbon neutral health sciences building at Gonzaga University in Spokane. And so welcome to Isabella. I'd also like to welcome Fumbi Chima. who is the Global Chief Information Officer of BECU and Ambassador for Innovate UK, a UK government agency for innovation and research. As the Chief Information Officer and business leader, she focuses on driving business outcomes through the use of technology and digital solutions, utilizing her significant experience in leading organizational change and global transformational programs, and by inspiring an organization to embrace a new future. Raised and educated in London, is married with 2 children and now living in the US, Fumbi brings a global multicultural perspective to her work. Prior to joining BECU, she was the transformational CIO for several global organizations, including the CIDO of Adidas and the CIO, and this is amazing, and I am so excited to read these two, the CIO of Fox Network Group, Burberry Corporation, Walmart Stores Incorporated Asia Business Operations, American Express Global Corporate Technologies as well. She has a proven track record of successfully partnering with business leaders and building world-class teams. And Dina Perot is also a social impact entrepreneur and the founder of the award-winning and nationally recognized STEM plus Arts program for youth of color called iUrban Teen, which has chapters in 4 states. She most recently launched Black Women in STEM 2.0. Ms. Perot is also a diversity strategist and international public speaker. She has served on several boards and commissions, including a gubernatorial appointment to the Commission on African Affairs in the state of Washington. She has been named in the Essence Magazine Top 50 Black Female Founders 2018, Washington State African American Achievement Award 2017, and was a White House Champion of Change for Technology Inclusion in 2013. And what's not on her bio is she has been instrumental in making sure that we are able to provide access when students had to go to remote online learning. She's got incredible offerings for students. Aset Alamu is a civil engineer with 11 years of experience working in water resources management and planning. She currently works as a senior project engineer at Seattle Public Utilities. Aset is an active member of the Seattle engineering community and led local chapters of National Engineering Association, such as American Society of Civil Engineers and Engineers Without Borders. She is passionate about introducing young students, especially girls, to opportunities in science and engineering. And so, folks, this is what STEM looks like. And I'm so excited to talk to these amazing people today. And so we've got 4 big questions before we go to audience questions. And so for the first question I have for you, there's no doubt that you're all currently doing great things in STEM, as we've heard from all of your bios. But before we talk about that, can we hear about your path and your journey? Was a career in STEM always your goal? Was it a linear path? And happy to start with Dina.
There we go. I had to figure out how to unmute myself. So yeah, no, I was an accidental STEMist person. I was when I was serving on the Governor's Commission on African American Affairs, all of our ethnic commissions were looking at the opportunity gap issue, especially for male youth of color who were falling through the cracks, being disenfranchised, incarcerated, all of those things that could happen. And so I instantly started working on what can I do in my community, which was at the time Southwest Washington, on putting a dent in this gap. And so around the same time, I was asked to participate on a Chief Information Officer Council in Portland, Oregon. And when I went to the very first meeting, it was a room full of white men, and I was it for diversity. And so when the meeting started, I started thinking, I said, okay, so over here we have these youth that are disenfranchised, disengaged, et cetera, no pathway to opportunity, but in this room is where the opportunities are, right? This is the future in this room, but no one looks like these kids in this room, right? So I instantly started thinking about creating something that could be a pathway, an exposure to, and iUrban Teen was launched 6 months later on the campus of Washington State University with the help of some of those men in that room who are still tethered to iUrban Teen. And so that's what pushed me into this direction and into the STEM space, is seeing that there was a need for something.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. And I love the STEMist moniker. I had to write that down. Fumbi, would you like to share?
Yeah, I had a struggle trying to figure out the mute as well, considering I'm a technologist. I similar to Dina, did not have a traditional, pathway for STEM. I was a liberal arts student who then, as I now, categorize myself a recovering accountant. So I have a chartered accountant status, and then moved into technology. And my technology path was really I guess my natural curiosity, because at the time, a lot of my work was surrounded around how do I help companies, unravel their complexity, or they get into trouble and they're trying to do some tax write-off or, figure out financial write-off and to mitigate it and figure out how do we optimize that. And so I came in from a data perspective, right? And then I think now people look at it as a data scientist, data guru. I came at it of how do I help unravel, the complexities of data from a financial aspect. And so, having that business acumen, which is fairly technical from an accountancy standpoint, because you have to look at, the intricacies and the legalities and the complexity from a tax implication, to understanding how it maps into systems from a process perspective to see, okay, how do we then optimize that? And so my curiosity was really more, okay, if I can help them save money after the fact, surely you can help them prevent from the accident from happening. So my marriage was really more, how do you bring processes and technology together? And so my natural curiosity was almost like, do I want to continue to be an accountant? Maybe not. Do I want to get into this, cool stuff of what people sounded like the bits and the bytes of the time? Well, why not? So, I kind of moved through. So I kind of have, that balance, and I've continued to keep that balance. I think for me, I always say, it's not about being a STEM. I actually coined, I think when I was at World Economic Forum doing a lot of work around STEM back in 2014, 15, I coined the word of saying you have to put STEAM, A, in it. Because the creativity, right, we often forget that, right? Whether you think about, using music or using art, the stimulus and the neurosciences element around the creativity is actually more magnetic to help influence and motivate, the science part. So it's not about STEM, it's about being inclusion. So you've got to add the A into it. So I feel like I fall right into place around the whole STEAM element.
I love the thought, the work needs to be integrated, right? They don't live separately from each other. So thanks for that reminder. Isabella, your journey, starting with that one class, talk to us about your journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So to kind of coin Dina's term here, I guess I did start out as a STEMist, if you will. I wasn't, immediately on the path of becoming a hydrogeologist, which is a groundwater geologist. I actually started out thinking that I wanted to be a dentist, which, to be honest, I still think would be a really cool job. But after a couple semesters in college, I kind of realized that wasn't the path. And, after having kind of an internal freak out and a bit of a panic, I talked with my advisor, who at the time was in the chemistry department, and they recommended, based on my interest in the outdoors, that I just take an introductory level geology class just to kind of, dip my toes in the water and see what I thought. And within about a month, it was pretty clear that I was in the right place. So in that sense, I wouldn't say it was linear, but I think from a young age, I always knew that I was interested in science. I've got 3 older siblings, and they're all great at what I perceive to be like tangible skills that they could showcase, like music and art and sports and things like that. And, I dabbled in sports, but I think from an early age, it was clear to me that my sport was like math and science. And, maybe in high school, that was kind of disappointing that I wasn't going to be memorialized in a high school yearbook for being good at math or, doing well on a chemistry test. But nowadays, I feel really lucky to have that skill set and to be able to use it in my job on a day-to-day. And I don't know if that's corny, but it's true.
No, not corny at all. I actually think the work that you all do and the way things have inspired you is very motivational for me to keep pushing. Asad, let's talk about your journey.
My journey was somewhat linear. You alluded to it earlier, how we got to STEM, and I've always been the kid that was interested in like building things, putting things together, disassembling, deconstructing. So my natural inclination for sciences and just trying to build stuff was, I guess, translated into I always wanted to be an engineer or a scientist of some sort. And sciences were a good strength for me in middle school and throughout high school. So going to college for engineering was just a natural fit. And I had an uncle that was going to college for mechanical engineer when I was younger, and I remember being inspired by like all the stories he has of like the machinery that he designs, they get to build and all of that. So I think like that had something in informing me about like the paths of science. And from then on, it was just a natural progression to like get to engineering school. And once I got there, I was very interested in chemistry and biology. So that was, I thought, where I was going. But then I discovered civil engineering, and being socially conscious and seeing the need for water projects like hydropower, the need for like electricity in my country of origin, which is in Ethiopia. That was a big inspiration for me to pivot to civil engineering. From then on, I moved to the US to pursue my master's in water resources management. I now work as a project engineer for Seattle Public Utilities. So engineering has always been like a natural fit for my talents, like personally and professionally.
I just want to take all four of you just school to school and let you talk to every single girl to think about what could be. So, I have to give a shout out. I'm pretty sure my mom and dad are watching tonight. So I have to give a shout out because they've been incredible role models for me. They started out in abject poverty, and we started out in poverty, but as I got older, by the time I was cognizant of things, they had moved us out of that, and it was through education. Right. So they've been my role models. They've been there to inspire me. My mom had to share shoes growing up, for example. My dad, 11 people in a 2-bedroom house. Right. And so I wanted to hear from you all, and I've heard bits and pieces of it, but maybe to unpack a little bit more, what influenced you, what inspired you, and what were those, role models, in your STEM careers for you to keep going. And it may look a little different because, Dina, how you've created an entire organization around this, but would love to hear what's inspired you, if there were role models that were important to you.
I'm going to kind of just jump in here because, again, I'm not really a STEMist, more of an entrepreneur, a rebel rouser, a convener is what I am. But, I think my other hat that I wear is that I'm a diversity strategist and work with clients on creating inclusive workspaces. And for me, it's all about inclusion, right? So when I was in elementary school, I was that kid that always wanted to make sure everyone was included in, because I knew the feeling of being excluded. So it's the same pretty much with iUrban Teen, is ensuring that these students are included in this educational pathway, that they're included in opportunities that they may not even be aware of or have been excluded from. So I would say that my role model was my mother, because, she always ingrained in us, no matter when you're on your deathbed, it doesn't matter what material possessions you have. What matters most is what you've done for others. So that has been ingrained with us. So I'm a social entrepreneur, meaning you don't get rich from being a social entrepreneur, right? You have to have the heart in it. So, with or without, we talk about it being a nonprofit and they're always looking for funding. I told people years ago, even when I was out in the White House, with or without funding, we're here for the long game, right? Our kids and families are used to people coming into the community with a one-time fix and they're gone, but I can pull a rabbit out of my hat like nobody can. And I've been pulling rabbits out for 10 years, right? So it's this thing about me. It's this, what can I do for the community? What can I do for others? But especially for our youth, especially for them, when you see how marginalized they are, and when you hear these tech companies talking about diversity and they're going to do this for diversity, and it's all these words, but it's all smoke and mirrors. They really aren't doing the hard work to really create those pathways.
And it sounds like you also are a role model and inspiring others too. So we really appreciate what you're doing, how hard you've been working.
Yeah, I mean, I applaud, what Dina said. I think that's really, it's key. It's very near and dear. Most people think of who's your North Star, who do you aspire to be? And much like you, I think I aspire, my motivating person was my mother. I think I was lucky enough to have a woman whom I would say was an iron woman. She, unfortunately, our father passed away. She was a professional. She was in the medical field professionally, globally, for a long time. And our father passed away when we were all like teenagers. I'm last of 6. And kept her professional career, which was world stage, as well as kept 6 children. And believe you me, we were a handful, right? You have 6 children, and you got to deal with, sending them to boarding schools and, keeping them in different places. And I think for me, the element of failure was not an option, right? We had all, as blessed enough to have all the privileges we could, but I also knew that failure was not an option. And she would knock you on the head, and she had no issue kind of disciplining you when she needed to, regardless of where you were. So for me, that was always my role model of, in spite of adversity, we got to, and she had 6 children that graduated universities, across, and had professionals. And now I'm proud to say I'm a mother of 2. My soon to be 19-year-old, a sophomore at uni, studying neuroscience and design, and by no factor, she ended up being a true STEM, right? They're all about passion and going to medical school because that's where she wants to be. And then I have a computer geek that spends all of her time on Minecraft when she possibly can at the moment, which, it's kind of like, you don't kind of train them to do that. It's just the natural path that they have done. But it's fundamental to say that, humility and perseverance and dedication is just so important. And I think that's really, my pride and my joy. And, I'd say that I look to my mother and my sisters, whom have kind of risen and be the powerhouses of their respective homes. And so my children see nothing else beyond that, right? And they see that, if a man can do it, so can I. Right, my dad is successful, my mom's successful, so can I. It's not a matter of one over the other. And I think it's about parity, and I think it's the natural piece that they've grown to know and learn, and also understand it's hard work, right? But there is no barrier, and I think it just has to continue to persevere. So I think for me, those are my role models.
Thank you. Aset or Isabella, would you like to share?
I'll
Sure.
go.
Okay.
So growing up, my family has always reinforced the values of you need to get an education, a college degree, and that's the path for success in life. And like, it doesn't matter what you major in, either in sciences or medicine, just you need to get a good education. And it doesn't, I remember my mom always used to say that it doesn't matter what you do in life, you have to just dedicate yourself to it, whatever career you do, and just succeed at it. Just hold on to something that excites you and just succeed at that. And just taking those lessons far is from, like, I used my background. So just a little bit of a background. I was born and raised in Ethiopia before I moved to the United States for my graduate degree. And growing up, I've always seen the need for infrastructure projects and how a lot of change can be made by just giving people access to like basic services, like either roads, running water, sanitation, or any major infrastructure project. So that has been just in the foreground when I'm thinking about pursuing either education or anything. And with that focus is like what got me this far is like I need to make a difference in the world that I live in. Like I need to give back to the people in my community. That's what I took with me when I moved here, and that's what I used for like my volunteering experience. I've volunteered extensively within the engineering community here in Seattle, from American Society of Civil Engineers to Engineers Without Borders. That's a national nonprofit organization that helps developing communities build infrastructure projects. So these causes help me give back professionally to what I think is like big causes to the thing that made me want to become an engineer, inspired me to like pursue this path. So just like focus on giving back to your community. And if you can give professionally, that's even like more rewarding because you can see the fruits of your labor. And giving back to the community of like younger people that come after you, either by being an example or exposing them to different things that they may not know of. Like you don't see a lot of like young women out in a construction site, like doing like different activities. So like when I go to these schools and see like I'm an engineer, they're usually like, oh, like that's interesting, because like whenever we think of engineers or the construction site, like we see like all big bulky men, and it feels like some sort of like power feat to do that. But no, like it's just giving a different story to like what we see in the world.
Thank you, Asad. I actually talked to a couple of girls at a STEM academy down the road from me that's within a public school setting. And they said, you know, it's always, we're the only two girls in class. And so, you know, when I started sharing about, you know, several of you, and I had met Dina last year. Actually, Dina and I've never met in person, always through the screen in this pandemic, but sharing, you know, even though you don't see yourself as a STEMist, you are opening doors to that access and helping students to understand what could be. And, you know, they continue to be encouraged. And so you guys don't necessarily know your ripple effect, but let me tell you what's happening. And so I'm just grateful for how you're giving back. So Isabella, I realized I didn't give you a chance to jump in as well on that question.
No, this is a great question. And I think one of the things that kind of drew me into the geology department in college was how collaborative it always was. It's such a collaborative science. And it wasn't just with my peers or other classmates, it was with my professors who I regarded so highly. They would say things like, oh, don't call me Dr. such and such, you know, call me by my first name. And I always felt like I had such a great support system from my professors in college. And then kind of transitioning out of the academic setting into my career, it's the same thing. Like I'm 3 years into my job in Seattle, but I'm working hand in hand on these projects day in and day out with people that have 30 years more experience than I do at my job. And it's really humbling. And, you know, whether or not they know it, I try to take everything as kind of like a lesson in mentoring, even if it's just watching them interact with our clients and kind of relay these like big scientific ideas to non-scientific audiences. It's just amazing to watch. And there's so much that I can take away from, you know, my peers, I guess, but they're mentors in my mind. And at my job in particular, I've always felt really supported to kind of explore my interests within geology so then I can apply that to different things. So for example, right now I'm taking a class on, it's kind of outside of work, but it's a virtual class on geochemical modeling and kind of how that relates to groundwater transport, which, you know, I'd like to say it was my own idea to just take it for fun, but it was actually my supervisor, knowing that I have a soft spot in my heart for chemistry, recommended that I take it because he was like, well, you know, you're interested in this, and how can we elevate your skills and your interests and plug you into projects that you want to be working on? So my mentors in aspect at my job are the best, and in life, and also similar to you, I think my mom is watching, so I got to give her a shout out because she's also been a rock and a huge support system.
You know, Isabel, I have to share a comment from the chat. Isabel, geology rocks, and so do you, Isabella. I believe pun intended with that. So thank you for sharing. You know, I want to talk a little bit about curiosity. You know, with Washington STEM, you know, we're trying to advance. We're trying to, you know, to push for credential attainment. Trying to push for innovation around how we do STEM education, much to your point, Fumbi. And you know, with PacSci, you know, their mission is to instill curiosity in every child. And so with innovation and curiosity, you know, really linked around problem solving, what role does curiosity play in your work? And how are you sparking that in others to come behind you? So what role does it play now, and maybe how are you sparking that curiosity?
Can I jump in and answer that?
Sure.
You know, everything, you know, I designed iUrban Teen in the way that I think. I'm always curious, and I have to have things that are hand-on, that are fast-paced, that are engaging. And so we feed curiosity in every touch point that we have. And I think that's why we have such a high retention rate of students. We've worked with over 9,300 students since we started back in 2011, and we have an 84% retention rate over the years. So families stay with us because everything is engaging. It's a curiosity spin. So for instance, we may have an event where at the end of that event, we may have a STEM tour of Google, Nintendo, or Brightwater Treatment Plant, whatever. And we ask them, because I want to see what did they really learn and how they're going to use this. So we give them 10 minutes, and they're always in groups. So they're in a learning pod of students, or paired learning. We never send them off somewhere by themselves to learn, because they like to think out loud and they like to brainstorm. And so we ask them, okay, now that you've seen this, this, and this, now knowing what you know now, how could you use this to create a project or a community good? We give them 10 minutes. And what those kids come up with in 10 minutes, that curiosity and things, and we tell them to think of whatever, it could be anything, nothing's off the table. But what they come up with in 10 minutes is astonishing. And another thing for me, I have an intentional reach to those D and F students, the students that people kind of tend to forget about because they're always looking and focusing on the A students. I look for the D and F students. You know, that's my intentional reach. Those are the students that are coming up with the most ingenious concepts of what they just learned, you know. And so, you know, I tell people we don't call our kids at risk, because they're not. We don't put those labels on our students. The only thing we call them are brilliant, you know. And with those students, I said, you know what? We know they're brilliant, they just haven't had that spark yet. And how can we feed that spark? So curiosity is all embedded in everything that we do. I think that shows that success for students. If you can feed in, Fumi, you were talking about STEAM. We call it, we're STEM plus arts. So arts is embedded in everything that we do. We have to have that creativity and that curiosity.
I love that. Dean, I think you've got some slides or pictures of some of your brilliant scholars.
I do.
You want to share any of them before, and you know, Fumbi, Asa, and Isabella, I promise I'll give you a chance to answer.
Yeah, we have, there was, you know, I was saying how much we missed, because everything that we did do in iUrban Teen is live, interactive, in person. I never had anything online, but because of COVID, we had to flip gears and create all this online content, which is going well, because we have students taking our online classes from London, Africa, Korea, Brazil, all throughout the United States, Canada. But it doesn't, for me, it's not like the live interactive sessions when you have that touch point with these students. And with our students in particular, especially our boys, because our urban teen has an intentional reach to male youth of color, but we're inclusive. So we have probably more than 50% girls in our program. We work with students with disabilities, especially on the autism spectrum, and low opportunity white youth. And so those are two of the boys in our program here in Seattle. And they've been with us now for, I'm going to say about 4 years. This was taken about 2 years ago. And I can feel how they're missing that engagement, from live events and all. But yeah, those are just a few. We have so many photos and all. And what's funny is the kids, one of our students in Los Angeles told me, he goes, "Miss Dina, you remind me of a mix between Oprah and Medea." And I was like,
That's a compliment.
I got the shock. I'm like, okay, I get it, So it's that kind of familiar comfort thing that we have. And I miss the kids. I just miss them.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I love the picture that just puts joy right in my heart, because that's the whole reason, I came into this work, was about the students coming behind me after learning to advocate for myself, after I became curious and realized I didn't necessarily have the right foundation, but I was going to get it one way or the other.
You're going to get it. And for me, it's like, how do we build that yellow brick road for these kids, right?
Yeah.
If we don't do it, who's going to?
Right.
So that's what, for me, look, I say that because I always say I want to be that wizard in the Wizard of Oz that like makes stuff happen behind the curtain.
I just like being Dorothy.
Dorothy, you like being Dorothy?
I like being Dorothy.
Really?
I like the red shoes. I like the prim and proper. I like the elements of, you're unassuming, right? Because they never thought Dorothy had anything, right? So she was always the one that's trying to be curious of figuring out how this, whether it's a Tin Man or whether the lion with no heart or feeling, and she embraced everybody. Right. And I think for me, that's really what I really like. And I think my job every day is curious. I mean, I always, somebody said to me earlier on today, she's like, when you work in technology, you're blamed if it works and you're blamed
if it doesn't.
So you must have an element of just enjoy pain. Right. And I thought that's actually true, because, there is no such thing as it's a thankless job to some extent. I feel like it's my mother, because we blame her for everything, right? Good or bad. If it's everything's gone wrong, like, Mom, it's your fault. Like, okay, there you are. So it's a thankless job. But I think part of it is also our job is to problem solve, right? And so that's our natural curiosity, right? That we people bring. And so it's not been like, for me, it's part of the DNA of doing work. Your system doesn't work. We're trying to figure out why, right? You think about innovation, whether it's AI or machine learning or blockchain or whatever the latest gadget is, we got to figure out how to put it all together to solve a problem, right? And continue to optimize and be more creative and faster and better, and so it just comes out of our job. So I think for me, that question was loaded. I was thinking like, okay, how do I innovate? But when I think about my job every day, I feel like my job is innovation. And I think when I go to colleges and I speak to young children or young adults that are in that career field and say, well, how do we do that? I said, just have a passion for curiosity. Right? Because you're always going to solve problems. The same problem today is not the same problem tomorrow. Right? And I think if you have the attitude and the passion to do with that, you'd excel. Right? And it's thinking about the art of the impossible. How could who would have thought? And I remember this very well. In 2010, I was putting a strategy together. And one of my companies to think about what the world was going to look like in 2020. And we were thinking about, she's going to go into the store and she's going to talk to this, this machine, and it's going to kind of predict what her consumer choices or what her preferences are going to be. It was out there. It was really out there. And today it's reality, right? And I think that's what we do every day, right? It's the art of that. And who would have thought about those kind of things? Who would have thought about, I use data. I mean, everyone, I tell my, my children, computer, Google, thanks to Google, Instagram, they all know what we do, right? They know what we do. You know where you are. They know you go into Instagram and all of a sudden you see an ad come up and you think it's mysterious. It's the technology. That's curiosity. And there are, phenomenal people out there that power and build that, algorithm to make it work. And that's really why I like, what I do. I'm sometimes not good at it. But that's the power of technology. And I think that's the power that I think it's that creativity that we have to kind of tell the message to encourage young people to really join the bandwagon of excitement. So Dorothy sounds really good for me. I like those red shoes too.
Asad or Isabella, anything you want to add with that question around curiosity?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I can jump in. I feel like that really resonates with me too. I think just being a scientist or having a career in STEM is just having an inherent curiosity about the way that the world works, or how things work, and wanting to understand it and how to make it better. So I'm going to sound like a broken record here with this one. Obviously, I love geology. I'll stop saying that, I promise. But another reason that I was drawn to geology is because it just immediately started providing answers to questions that I didn't even really know I had, or maybe I just hadn't rationalized it. So, for example, I'm like looking out my window and I see the Olympics if I look to the west, and I see the Cascades if I look east, and I'm like, why are those different? Why do they look different? And when you start studying geology, you start getting answers to those things. And every step you take, everywhere you travel, there's geology underfoot. And just being able to kind of rationalize and understand why it is the way it is, or why it looks the way it looks, was really cool to me. And I think probably the most concrete example I have of that in a job setting was before I started my job when I was in college. The math building was run on ground source heat pump energy, which is like a green energy source that uses the earth and that uses groundwater for energy transfer, so you don't have to rely on carbon or like a fuel-based alternative. And I thought it was really cool, and I was really nerdy about it, and I was a tour guide at the time, so I learned all about it. And then I had the opportunity to share with the other tour guides what I've learned, so then they could talk about ground source heat pump energy on their tours if they wanted. And it was that curiosity for me then. And now in a career setting, kind of being on the other side of the fence, I get to be one of those people that helps design those systems. And I get to work with other geologists and hydrogeologists and engineers. And now that I guess I have an understanding of the way that it works, I get to help optimize those systems. And it's like, okay, how can we take this really great thing and how can we make it better and, cheaper and smaller and more sustainable and more, earth positive, better for everyone. So it's an exciting part of having a STEM career. And it's definitely like what gets me up in the morning and what gets me through these dark days, although it's getting better with daylight savings time.
I love how the curiosity from just giving tours sparked that into an entire career journey.
Yeah, thank you.
That's incredible. Asad, how about for you?
So curiosity built into my work as a civil engineer, as an infrastructure designer, by putting myself as a designer in other people's shoes. And this can be the community that's receiving the infrastructure project. It could be stakeholders, it could be communities that the project is based in, or the end users of that infrastructure. And it usually involves putting yourself in the other people's shoes and thinking about what their problems could be. How are you going to solve their problem? As an engineer may have an idea of, this is the most efficient way to transport water from point A to B. But if you don't understand, if you're not curious about the community's perspective of how do they want to access those resources, it could be sanitation, it could be water, it could be if you're building a new road, where would they want new additions? Is it by the store? Is it by the school? So you have to really be curious enough to put yourself in other people's shoes to become a better engineer, to become a better designer. And that's when you can have a project that speaks to the public, that the public can engage in, and that the public would feel that they deserve, and not just something that a utility is going to build, or something that a nonprofit organization is going to install and then like nobody's going to use it. So that is one aspect of the curiosity. And the other aspect is, as my work as a project engineer at Seattle Public Utilities, we maintain a lot of assets underground and above ground. And we have to think about how the operators are going to maintain and operate it in the long term. So that's another aspect of curiosity that we need to always remind ourselves of, is how are the people that are maintaining these facilities using it? So I find myself constantly having to put myself in other people's perspective to really do my job better, because that's when you can communicate with them in a language that they understand, and also provide them with a product that is essential to them, and not something that's just like the most optimal or the most efficient solution engineering wise. So that is how I see curiosity in the way I do my job on a daily basis.
I love that long-term look and using that curiosity to think about the future and sustainability. You know, as you all were talking, I was thinking about, you know, sometimes as adults, we stifle curiosity, and we need kids to continue to be curious. We need our, you know, folks, our teams to be curious in order to find those solutions we hadn't even thought about. You think about Fumbi's story about looking 10 years out. Like, I remember when there was no email. Some days I wish there was no email. But you know, but before the internet, right? We had the intranet.
Yeah.
Before we had computers, we had, you know, word processors, we had typewriters. Somebody was curious enough to keep that going. And I was thinking about my grandson. We bought him some slime that was in a container, and he was just supposed to squish it. And we weren't paying attention, and he opened it because he wanted to see the slime. And then he wanted to see how the slime might stick on my walls, as his grandmother, my very white walls. And I couldn't even be mad. You know, I was just like, wow, that's impressive. They were like, that's not how he was supposed to use it. He thought outside the box and wanted to know what surfaces it would stick on. Would it stick on my fridge, which is stainless steel? Would it stick on my walls, which is flat paint? Not a good thing with slime. But that curiosity, I had two choices: to get really upset and go, I cannot believe you just marked up my walls, or to be like, oh, that's interesting. Like, I would prefer you not throw it on my walls, but let's talk about what we learned, which was the route, you know, that I chose as his grandmother. And I think about, you know, to our viewers, you know, if you are an adult viewer, you know, what is your role in keeping that curiosity going? Because the world, we need curious people. And then, you know, if you are a student, you know, we hope that we're continuing to light a fire under, you know, your curiosity and give you opportunity. So I have a final question before we go into the Q of A. And speaking of our viewers, so there are a lot of young girls and women watching tonight, and I loved how on your journey you all became STEMists at different times on your journey. There wasn't one way to do this and find that career path. And Dina, for you, you're opening up the world to these future STEMists, right? So what's one piece of advice you would have for the young girls and women who are watching tonight?
Oh, wow. For me, I'm going to say, and this is something that I wish I would have done much earlier in my career, in my life. I wish in my teens and 20s, I wish I would have known the value of having a good mentor or mentors in my life, how to ask those questions, right? How to not seem like I knew it all, which I didn't know anything. When I think back on it, I'm like, boy, I was an idiot. But I really wish that I would have really knew about the role of a mentor and how to be a good mentee. And for me, the work that we do, we have a team of mentors that are there with these teens. We have our IUrban Teen alumni students who are now in college, who are mentors to the next generation. I make sure that we have that because I want our kids to really understand the value of that guidance and having that team, having that tribe around you, to help you in your trajectory. So that's my advice, is for you to think about, don't be afraid to ask someone to be a mentor. Learn about who they are, what they do. If that's something that piques an interest for you, ask them if they could be even a short-time mentor, long-time mentor, something, but speak up.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think, asking for help, right? And not being afraid. I think, you said something, Dina, is like, the mentors, I'd actually even go beyond that and just generally asking for help.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I think some of the weaknesses we have as women is that we feel that if we ask for help, it feels like we're weak. That's it's just a facade, right? It's kind of the sense of, oh my God, I feel like I have to carry the weight of the world on my shoulders. And if I had known that, almost 30 years ago, when I started my IT world, I probably would have been further along where I am today. And so definitely asking for help. I think the other piece of my advice that I say to be confident and actually tell people what you want to do, right? I remember my first, people asked me, what do you really want to do? I left middle management and it was almost like, what's my career path? And I know I really wanted to be a CIO, or I wanted to be an executive, but I was fearful of voicing that out because it felt like that was egoistic, it was arrogant. But back to, if people don't know what you want to do, then it's very hard for them to help. Mm-hmm. Right? So voice what you want to do, voice your aspirations, as long as you're confident about it, unless you're pretty determined around it. Tell people what you want to do, and then that's when you're going to get the help, you're going to get the mentoring, you're going to get the guidance that most people do. And then the last thing is be good at what you are doing, right? Be good, be detailed, be really, really good, because once you're good, people will see that you're good, and then they can help you navigate through it. And so it's about asking for help, be confident, and then not being shy of voicing out what your aspirations are.
Yeah. I want to add something else in here before I forget it and lose my train of thought. And Fumi made me think about it, what it was. One of the things that I really, really, really encourage our young folks is to learn how to advocate for yourself, right? Learn, that is so, so, so very important. I got the biggest compliment from one of our students who was interviewed, who's now majoring in cybersecurity at University of Washington. And what he told the interviewer was that Miss Dina taught me how to be in a room when no one looks like me and be confident, right? So that's very important especially for our youth of color, is to learn, because oftentimes you're going to be in rooms where you're the only one. Mm-hmm. Still be present, make it known that you are there, advocate for yourself, speak up.
Love that. Isabella, any advice from you?
Yeah, I have two, if that's okay. Okay, first and foremost, and who knows, granted, I'm only 3 years into my career, but so far so good. I would say important to find a career that you love and that makes you excited and you feel passionate about, and you wake up in the morning thinking, like, nice, another day, can't wait to go to work. Which, especially in this last year with the pandemic, and if people are watching, they're working from home or attending school from home, that these days kind of have a tendency to drag on, but having a job that you love and that you feel really passionate about helps a lot. And I feel really grateful to have found one that I love. So that's number one. And then number two would be, if you are a girl or woman that's interested in pursuing a career in STEM, is just to take a step back for a minute and be like, wow, I had to jump through a lot of hurdles to get where I am, and, break a lot of barriers that not everybody had to break to get to where they are. And I think it's really important just to remind yourself, hey, I had to work extra hard to get here, which means I'm extra interested in my job and I'm extra good at it. And it's important to remind yourself, this is great, and I'm doing a great job. because I made it.
For that. Asad, how about you?
So Dina just very briefly described it at the end. So my number one advice to younger girls especially would be, so when we talk about STEM, it's always like you have to be good at math. And a lot of girls get discouraged by math early on in school, even in middle school, and don't really get on that track because the middle school wisdom is girls are not good at math. It's boys that are better at it. So if you're not really inclined to it, then maybe there'd be some people that wouldn't pursue it. So I would say, even if you're not good at math, there is still an opportunity, a place in STEM for you, because STEM is not just math. It's sciences, it's engineering, it's the biological sciences, it's physical sciences. So there's just a lot of opportunities within that. So don't be discouraged if you're not good at math from pursuing the STEM fields. I wasn't good at math. I was strong in other subjects, which is how I landed up in engineering. But if I saw engineering as that's a purely math career, then I wouldn't be where I am today. And the other advice that I wanted to give, like Dina said, is don't be discouraged when you're pursuing things that are of interest to you by being the only person in the room that looks like you, or is the only girl, is the only person of color, or you could be the only person from like a different country, different state. Like, it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, you're pursuing your goals, you're pursuing your curiosity and moving ahead with your goals. So just take that big step and keep at it, because there's going to be mentors, there's going to be advocates along the way that's going to help you through this. And if you're good at relationship building, I always advise just build relationships with peers and with teachers, with mentors, whoever you can bond with that can feed that curiosity and help you along with the journey. It's so worth it for your career and for your pursuits.
Audience, I hope you're writing down some of these gems. I know it's recorded, but they're dropping knowledge. I'm going to shift the focus a little bit. Still looking for advice, but focusing on organizations and institutions. As we talk about, what are your recommendations for organizations, like PacSci, in terms of, how do we, eliminate the barriers that have been obstacles for girls, and women in STEM? What are some thoughts? And I know, you all have dealt with this along your journey. So thinking about what you're thinking about the barriers that exist out there, what are your recommendations to organizations and institutions? And maybe it's even around their responsibility to help eliminate some of those barriers.
Yeah, I mean, I think I can speak for, a few organizations I've worked with. I think organizations are doing the best they can. I know Dina has always said, well, maybe they're not doing enough. I mean, would never do enough, right? It's just the reality is we would never do enough. But I think to the best that they can really look at really trying to encourage and motivate, and whether it's women in tech or whether there's a lot of STEM programs, and partnering with institutions and colleges and the Boys and Girls Club and all that, to kind of help encourage and motivate young girls. Organizations are beginning to do more and more of that. I used to be in the retail world, and we know that women, it has a higher buying power than men, and it's still, and also when you even look at the decisions at the executive level, when you have two or more women, sitting at the executive level, you have the statistics have shown that organizations have grown probably 10x, right, through that, because we have such a huge perspective. So there's a lot of data that shows that the value of women or female gender is important to bring into the organization. So I think the corporate are doing it. They're finding different partnerships and different avenues, and whether working with foundations to encourage and motivate. The underlying issue that I see, and personally, is, I think, as Esset said it, we don't have enough in the pipeline, right? Because we are discouraged that, oh, you have to be good at math, right? And so if you already have that mental block, to then move into the science fields or the STEM field can be a little bit limiting. So I think part of it is having this kind of conversations, the girls to see that the world is their oyster, to see that there are women out there that are doing great things. And the world, you now have the first female vice president who's, of color. And she said in her speech, I may be the first one, I'm not going to be the last. The world is out there to really give them in this hope, right? And I think companies and corporations are taking onto that and trying to develop programs to help do that. But it's also dependent on those girls to believe in themselves, to encourage, to go through adversity, because it's not hard, it's hard. Whether you're doing organic chemistry, whether you're doing math, whether you're doing physics in college, it's not easy, right? But knowing that you're going to have to persevere and continue to leave that, to persevere against all adversity will help you get to that ambition. I think that's the key message.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to have one more of you answer this, because there's questions coming in the chat that I want to make sure to get to you. Any one more person want to jump in on this one?
If I can chime in as somebody that worked as a volunteer to do a lot of outreach for STEM and sciences for schools. I think educational resources like the one Pacific Science provides is very valuable, and the groups and the organizations that reach out to Pacific Science Center and organizations like that are already in the know about those resources. But I would be encouraged in seeing if educational organizations reach out to school districts that are not, like poor school districts that may not have a lot of resources and may not know about all these like free resources for students or after school activities or even weekend activities, because the already good schools have those resources, have those additional things to help their students go further within pursuing their pursuing a lot of things. But poor school districts and communities that are like farther out from the city don't have those resources. So I'd be very happy to see like more outreach to those kinds of communities.
Thanks,
I want to just add on there too, and as it was saying it, I'm glad to have this partnership with Pacific Science Center to reach out to our student population, who a lot of them don't know what the service offerings were. And so we just did have them do a program for us, their virtual tours for our Mindstream programs and all. So we look forward to bringing more youth there that have not had that opportunity to. So for me, I would say it's creative partnerships with organizations, like ours, right? Where we can brainstorm and collaborate on how can we reach the most students. But one of the things I want to just go back to what Fumi was saying, in the corporate world, they keep saying it's a pipeline problem. It's not a pipeline problem. We have the students. I was telling a lot of corporations, not only do I have your next talent pipeline, I also have your next consumers as well. So you really need to think about supporting this program. But after George Floyd's murder last year is when I saw some shifting happening, where there was more interest, more intentional outreach to programs like mine and to Black Girls Code and other Black-led organizations, to partner with us. So there was an opportunity there for us. It was sad that had to happen to get that kind of awareness. But I think that now, just within the last year, there have been more corporations that have started doing the intentional outreach to try to create that pipeline.
Thank you, Dina. So Isabella, I'm going to put this question actually to Isabella and Asad. What is a typical workday like? Are you in an office or a lab or in the field? And Asad, I think you might have some images as well. So when you share out, feel free to share your screen.
I've sent it to Zita or Jen.
Oh, okay.
Share it. So my job right now is with Seattle Public Utilities, involves working on a large tunnel project in Seattle. And that's an underground tunnel from Ballard to Wallingford neighborhood. And so it's my job mostly revolves around coordination for design. And this can be anything from making sure that we're not impacting any other utilities in the way, like electric poles or other gas lines in the area, making sure that what we're designing can have the capacity to hold the stormwater flow that we're designing it for, and making sure that the canals, the Ship Canal, Lake Washington, and Lake Union don't have any more additional flows going into it, because this is mainly a water quality project that is meant to protect Seattle's waterways from additional stormwater flows. So it usually involves around like coordinating with different community groups. King County is a big partner in this project, and we work with them to make sure that a lot of neighborhoods are minimally impacted during construction, which has started right now. And there's a big slide on the big tunnel boring machine that's going to be boring under the Fremont and Ballard neighborhoods. This is way smaller than the Big Berta, the SR99 project, but it's still pretty sizable. I think there's one picture where you can see how, yeah, so that is, I think, like a third of like a person's height. That's pretty big. It's the last slide. Yeah, so that's how large the tunnel boring machine is. And this is what's going to go underground without people even hearing it, feeling any vibration. So it's been a pretty cool project to work on.
Wow, that's amazing. And I want to check out the machine now.
Yes.
every time I get access to somebody's job, I'm like, that's what I want to now be. Isabella, how about you? What does the day in the life look like for you?
Oh man, it could be so many things. It could be in the lab, it could be in the field, it could be in the office or in my apartment right now. But actually today I was out in Swim before this. I'm working on a project with Washington State Parks, and they are developing one of their state parks to eventually have campgrounds and day use facilities, but they need a water right to do so. So I was literally walking around in the forest about 4 hours ago looking for some wells, and then I had to come home real quick and shower. But a lot of the work that I do is involving water rights, which doesn't always, have the glamour of walking around in a forest. Sometimes I'm looking at, documents that farmers were writing to each other in 1920, and they're, arguing with their neighbors about how you're stealing all my water. So, there's never a dull day. Oftentimes out overseeing wells being drilled, or sampling water, or just throwing a pump around and looking at infrastructure. And sometimes it's doing groundwater models. It's really, I think that's my favorite part about my job as a consultant. I get to work on so many different kinds of projects and use different parts of my brain, and there's never a dull day.
I love this. And I'm adjusting. I was like, I originally going to say this is what women in STEM look like. No, this is what women professionals who are doing really good things look like. It's just like you span so many things. It's amazing. I have another question from the audience, and I'll pose it to all four of you. How has failure played a role in your journey? How has failure played a role in your journey?
Well, I'll jump in there. I've always been a risk taker, right? I've never been afraid to fail. And I don't really like to use the word fail, because to me, it just didn't go right, right? What can I do now to make it better? Or how do I do it differently? So in those mistakes or those hiccups is what makes you grow from those. No one came into this space perfect, right? And doing everything perfectly. I think so often people get discouraged because something didn't go well or didn't go right. They failed at it. And so they won't try again. That's it. I have always been one that will learn from that mistake. I might go into that valley for a little while, but I'm not going to unpack my bags in that valley. I'm going to sit there and I'm going to learn about what failed. How can I do this differently? How can I improve upon this and get out of that valley? So that's how I look at it. And sometimes those biggest mistakes help create this mosaic of who you are. So I want our students to think about that. Don't be afraid if it doesn't go well, right? What can you do to make it better next time?
Anybody else want to share?
I would like to echo what Dina said. I don't want to see things as failure. It's usually an opportunity to learn better. And in my about 10 years career as an engineer, I wouldn't say I had a professional failure, but there had been a lot of points where I had to learn from some things that didn't go right. And this could be a project budget overrun or design that did not go well or stakeholder that did not get their needs met. But there's always just the opportunity to learn better from how you're conducting your work or how like the team is approaching the project. So it's, yeah, I think like failure is it's not the right framework to look at it.
It's such a negative.
Going into your career, trying to build something. These are more like opportunities for learning. And learning from your mistakes is like, that's not a lesson you're going to forget anytime soon.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's what, there's a comment in the chat. There's no such thing as failure as long as you learned from it, and you can learn from everything.
Yeah.
So there is another question, and especially as we kind of wind down on time here, for parents and teachers listening, how can we encourage our students and children to not give up and to persevere and stick with it when it's hard? And Fumbi, this speaks a little bit to what you even just mentioned, even about, the coursework being hard, and how do you have that resilience?
I think it's support, right? I think the teachers and the parents just continue to support these kids. I think the most important piece of it is believing in them. When my kids say they can't, there's no such word in my house as cannot, right? I ban that word. I say it, but they can't. Because by saying I cannot, you've just defeated. It's like you've defeated. You've even failed without trying, right? It's that defeatist mindset. So I always tell people, just try. And if you back to that whole opportunity, it's not a failure. If you don't get through it, then you try again and you move on from it. So it's the same thing that I'd say with teachers and parents. I still remember the professor in college that encouraged me when I had a really difficult course that I just thought I don't think I'm going to make this, and they just keep you that words of encouragement. It's like sports. The greatest coach are the ones that just make you do things and you just go, did I just jump over that? Like, really? You look at it and you're like, I can't do this, right? But they encourage you and you go beyond where you need to. And I think that's the role of teachers, and that's the role of parents, and that's the role of your support network around you, is continue to motivate and encourage you against where you even your imagination. I just think that encouragement is so important, and the love and the support is so important.
Yeah, the love and the support is key. Supporting them. For me, we factor in, and even for my sons, I believe in quick, short wins, right? If we give them a project that might be a 4 to 6 week project, they're going to be little quick wins all the way along, like we're feeding them all the way through to boost that encouragement, right? And that self-confidence in what they're working on. And to be there in a support role with them. The more important thing is we never dictate to the youth in our program. It's more like we're peers. We're there to help support you along the way. Some of the most important comments that I hear from our students when we ask them at our events, at the end of our events, what did we do right by you? And where did we miss the mark? What do you think we need to do? We're bringing them in. What do you think? What do you want? How do you think this would work for you? But the most valuable comment that I hear from them is, that they felt valued. When they feel valued and supported, they're going to thrive.
Asad or Isabel, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I feel like my answer to that kind of touches on a lot of things that have already been said basically tonight in some fashion or another. But, like we just mentioned, there's no such thing as a failure, just opportunities for learning. And I think Fumbi mentioned this earlier, but don't be afraid to ask for help if you're struggling with something. And I think I remember when I started graduate school, it was like immediately clear to me that I had a great background in geology, but I knew nothing about computers or computer science or coding or programming. And day one, my graduate school advisor was like, "Do you have Python on your computer?" And I was like, "What is that? Like a snake? Like, what even is that?" And then that was embarrassing. Come to find out a little bit later, like that's a tool that people use, I guess. And it was really embarrassing. And my whole cohort in graduate school had that background. It's like they got some memo while they were in school that they needed to be taking computer science classes, but that one just skipped right on over me. So my first semester was like 1 second away from being like, I am not qualified to be here. I'm an imposter. And I didn't do that, which I'm glad I didn't. I'm glad I stuck it out. But what I ended up doing was just taking like an introductory computer science class. So it was like me in grad school and then a bunch of freshmen in college, which, was like semi-embarrassing, but also I don't even care. It was the most useful thing I ever did. And I learned so much from it and it was so helpful. So don't be afraid to ask for help. There's no shame and, just keep going.
Great advice. Asad.
I would say like not everything comes easy for everybody. I mean, like, there's going to be courses that you struggle with. There's going to be some things that are not intuitive for you, and it's okay. I mean, like part of it is admitting to yourself, okay, I'm not good at this, but I'm going to see it through. And if you can find the support from your teachers, from your parents, that would be great. And if you can, even if you don't, you just convince yourself that is just like one piece of the pie. Like if you don't have that figured out, doesn't mean that your whole academic career or your whole goal is unachievable. It just means that you need to put in the extra work. And it could be like taking an extra course, or you would, if it's something that has to accumulate to something, you may get delayed. And when you get there, but you're not going to have everything figured out. You're not going to be, there are some people that are good at everything, but some people are not good at all the courses. So it's okay. And you just need to persevere. Just need to put in that extra effort to get you through to that graduation line or to that accomplishment. And don't be afraid to say like, I'm struggling at this, but I'll make it. Even if you're not going to get like an A+, if you can still pass that course, you're on your way to something bigger.
I love that. There's this notion of just reminding ourselves, I belong here. Like whatever that here is, I belong here. And it may be hard and there's something I have to figure out, but I belong here. So I want to thank each and every one of you for taking time tonight. I know you've had long days and now it's, into the night that you're giving us your time, sharing your lived experience and your insight, your wisdom. And just grateful for PacSci for giving us this platform. And so, audience, just remember you met them here when you see their books and all of those things that are out there in their podcasts. You met them here on the PacSci platform. So I would like to hand it off to Zita.
Angela, thank you so much. And a giant thank yous to Fumbi, Isa, Isabella, and Dina for joining us tonight and for taking the time to share your expertise and your experiences and your wisdom with all of us. I know that everybody listening at home, including myself, there's definitely some action items, I think, for us now to take some action and inspire the next generation of women and girls to join STEM fields. We hope that all of you have enjoyed tonight's event, and we would love to hear your feedback. We'll be sending you a survey to everybody who's registered, and we would very much like to hear what you thought about tonight's event. If you enjoyed tonight's talk, you can please share it with family and friends. This talk will be saved on the Pacific Science Center YouTube page for ongoing watching, along with all of our other previous Science in the City presentations. And remember to sign up for our e-newsletter, pacsci.org/SITC, and donate at pacsci.org/support. Signing up for our newsletter will also give you information about upcoming programs. For example, in just 3 weeks, it will be our next Science in the City, and we'll be looking at COVID-related safety with Alaska Airlines. Our virtual field trips are continuing this school year and well into the summer. You can learn more about those. And don't forget that our general public registration for summer camps, both in person and virtual, opens this Thursday, March 25th. In the meantime, we hope that you take your curious minds and take some of the actions spoken about tonight. Go find a mentor, go be a mentor, ask for and give help, and share what you're curious about with others. Thank you so much, everybody, and we hope you have a great evening.
Thank you.
Bye.